Okay, we've got an exciting one.
Yeah, this one's going to be a good one. We're excited to sit down with Melinda Hollerman.
Yes, so she's a local lender. I'm going to be talking with her today. Jeff is going to be behind the camera, but she's going to be talking to us about all the questions that you want to ask your lender. And so I don't think there's any special thing to stay to the end for, but I think you're going to want to watch this one probably several times in a row because she has so much information and I cannot wait to talk to her and learn so much about her. First time to our channel and you want to learn everything about living in College Station, Texas and the surrounding area, then click subscribe and tap the notification bell. Couldn't think of what it was.
Right.
Anyway, my name is Tara. This is Jeff, and along with David, we make up the Schellenberger team here in College Station, Texas. So if you are looking to buy your forever home, pick up some rental property, buy a second home, we are the team for you. So our contact information is in the description box below. So please do not hesitate to reach out so we can start the conversation about getting you to this area. And remember, we have helped people just like you find the right place at the right time, right here. Melinda, we are so excited to talk to you today.
Howdy, Tara. I'm glad to be here.
We really are. We made a video recently talking about what are the first steps that people need to take when they're considering buying a home. And one of those steps was finding a lender. So now we have you here to talk to us about what are the questions that someone wants to ask a lender. Because, I mean, I have tons of questions in my head, but you know, we're gonna be talking about what kind of questions do they ask the lender? Why is it important? Or what's the value of having a local lender versus a non-local lender? Let's just get into that. So let's get started. You just tell me, like, when someone doesn't know anything, what are some of the first questions they should ask lenders? Because they should be talking to more than one to get started, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk about that. So honestly, the lender is kind of the first step. Sometimes people go to the realtor because you want to look at that house, but that realtor is instantly going to send you to the lender so that they know what house to show you and to make sure that you even qualify to buy a home.
So that's based on money. You're saying that in the sense of they'll send you to the lender because they need to know how much money can this person actually spend on a house.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, because that lender is going to zero in on what monthly payment can you afford? What are your resources for down payment and closing costs? And that's going to point them toward a price point of home, which is what the realtor needs to know to do a good job for you. So that's one of the main reasons that the realtor sends you to the lender first. But absolutely not all lenders are the same. And you can basically say there's the big box online lender and then the local lender. And there's definitely a difference. You're going to get tons of advertisements from online big box. You're just barraged with that. And so that may be the first thought that you have. And as a buyer, you might be a little surprised that the realtor even cares who you talk to. As long as you get a loan, loan's a loan, right? Not really. There's a big difference. And the reason that realtor wants you to talk to a local lender is for you to have, number one, to just get a totally different experience compared to if you've already talked to one of the online guys, to have a more personalized experience. Lender is going to treat you more like that realtor is treating you, which is an individual person who is going to be in our community, who has their own needs and dreams and home buying goals. And because we're in this community too, we're going to be your neighbor. So we want to know much more about your story, your goals, and treat you like an individual and educate you along the way, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. We want to be able to go through those steps with you. It's the biggest purchase most people ever make.
Right.
And you're only going to do it a few times in your life. So you're never going to be an expert at it. That is why you need access to local experts who you can trust.
And it's a matter of access sometimes, right? Like if I have your cell number and I can call you on Sunday evening at 8 o'clock if I needed to and get a hold of you.
And absolutely, and all my clients do too. All my clients have my cell phone number. I ask my clients, how do you want to communicate? Would you rather me text you? Would you rather me call you? Is email better? So we're going to communicate the way you want to communicate. I am not going to assume it's an email. You're going to see much more with big box.
Yes.
Or call center. You're never going to get a call center from me. It's me. I'm your person, right? So
they're going to call you. I mean, that was one of the questions. Like, it never even crossed my mind to call your lender and go through a call center and not even get the same person that you'd been talking to before. That would terrify me if I was trying to get a loan for a house. I would just assume I'd get to talk to the same person, but that is clearly not the case.
It's like any other financial product that you're going to get online. If you are going to call your credit card company, if anything that you're going to do online, you're going to have a different experience than talking to somebody local. And yes, you're going, and that's one of the questions you should ask, okay? If you call that online lender, are you going to get to talk to the same person every time? Do you have to go through a phone tree to get to that person?
Are they available after hours and
right.
weekends?
What are the hours that a live person even answers? Are there texting capabilities with them if that's how you like to communicate? And I think that you're going to find those answers are very different than a local individual who you're working with. It's going to be much more like dealing with your realtor, but I'm the financial side. Your realtor is the house side. Whereas if you go with a big box lender, it's like trying to reach your credit card company.
Okay, so as we wrap up just talking about the differences between local lenders and big box lenders, I understand sometimes sellers really prefer for the buyer to have a local lender. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, there's a few reasons why sellers and sellers agents prefer local, almost always. The first one is accessibility. If there is an issue, can that seller's agent pick up the phone and reach that lender? Can the buyer or the buyer's agent reach that lender if a crisis comes up so that that lender can quickly address it and keep the transaction on track? And you're going to have much more success doing that with a local lender who has had their hands on that file the entire time and knows what's going on, and you can text in the evening if you need to, or call early in the morning. And at a big box lender, it's much more likely that it's not the same person working on it all the time. They're going to have to open it up, get up to speed. You're going to have to reach them during business hours. So it's that accessibility and ability to quickly adapt to changes, because real estate moves fast. We are working on closing dates. So that's a biggie, is accessibility. The second one is really accountability. I am local. I work in this community. If I do a bad job, I don't get referrals anymore, and it hurts.
So true.
It hurts my business.
Yeah.
So I have a vested interest to do a good job for this client so that you're happy with me and you can confidently refer to me knowing that I'm going to do my best effort for all of your clients.
Right.
A big box lender doesn't know any of us and doesn't care because they don't get their business through good relationships and doing a good job. They get their business through blasting you with advertisements. It's a totally different model.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. I have a quick little story about a situation. You know, the whole idea of the timeline, I mean, there are hard deadlines when you are buying a piece of property, and if you miss a deadline, somebody can get out of a contract, and it can get really messy. So David Schellenberger on our team, he had some clients that were buying a home, and they used a big box lender, and the appraiser came out of Houston, and so none of the appraisals he used to compare to the home that was being purchased were in that same neighborhood, and so the house didn't appraise. And the clock was ticking. And so David, after trying to work with that lender and they didn't send out another appraiser or whatever, he ended up calling another local lender and said, I need this done like yesterday. And so they ended up having to switch lenders in order to have another appraiser come out to properly appraise the property. And the local lender would have caught that initial appraisal and been able to address it. But that other lender had no idea. I mean, they weren't from around here. The appraiser was not from around here either. And so they ended up having to switch lenders.
Lending is just as local as real estate. It really is. Even though you can have people across the country, you can have someone in California licensed to do a loan here in Texas, just like you said, they don't know anything about our area. I couldn't go do work in their area competently. So you will get people, and let's even say you've got somebody moving from Dallas or Oklahoma to our community, whatever. They've got a lender that they love up there who's licensed here to work down here. They're not going to know this market. They're not going to catch things like that. They're not going to have the same working relationship. And it really does matter in lending as much as it does in real estate to keep it local for efficiency and just to keep your transaction on track.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So to get into some specific questions that people should ask their lender, I have one. What is the difference between those two different interest rates that you see, the APR and I don't know what the other one's called.
Just the interest rate.
Just the interest rate. That's very confusing.
Yes. Okay. And that's kind of a tricky concept. And the APR is, in my personal opinion, the government's attempt to educate the consumer, but is not, especially in this market, it is not really educating the consumer very well. So you've got your interest rate to your loan. That is your basic interest rate. And then usually when you see that, right after that, you're gonna see usually a slightly higher interest rate with APR behind it. And that is annualized percentage rate, all right? And that is the government's attempt to show the true cost to the consumer. And what they're trying to do there is take all of the fees associated with that loan and incorporate them into the overall percentage rate that you're paying. Because when you have a closing, you have your interest rate, right? But you also have a lot of fees that you pay at closing. You have your title fees, your lender fees, if you bought points to buy your interest rate down. So those are all fees associated with it. And so the government said, okay, well, let's try to show the consumer that those fees may vary by lender. So even though lender A is giving them a certain interest rate and lender B is giving them that same exact interest rate, the fees are going to be different. If lender B has way higher fees, then that APR for lender B is going to be higher than the APR for lender A, even though the interest rate is exactly the same. And that was an attempt to show the consumer, hey, the fees are more here. Right.
But I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, yeah.
But those fees are all paid at closing. So it's like a one-time chunk of money you're spending.
Right.
But that APR is taking that chunk of money and folding it into your interest rate.
Into that entire loan, yes. Into the life of the loan through that interest rate. And
but that's just on paper.
That's just on paper.
Okay.
Okay. And also the other thing that it doesn't take into account is it assumes that you are going to keep that loan, if it's a 30-year fixed rate loan, most of the things we talk about are, that you are going to keep that loan for the entire 30 years. So it annualizes those costs over a 30-year period. And that's not really an accurate representation of those costs. Particularly, there's just a lot of factors right now. People tend to not live in a home more than 7 years, all right? So right there, just going on how often people keep a note generally, that's not an accurate representation, so that's not a valid number anymore. As soon as you know you're not gonna live there 30 years, that's not a good expression of that number, and all it does is confuse people.
But for someone comparing lenders, it's a quick glance way to get a true idea of what you're actually spending.
Somewhat.
Okay.
Somewhat. It depends on if you're buying points, if you're going to keep, how long are you going to keep that loan? Is that lender going to refinance you later? Almost every loan I do now, I tell people this is not your forever loan, all right? We're gonna refinance at some point.
Does that mean you sell it or you keep it but refinance it?
Well, BC is very unusual in that we don't sell our notes, right?
Okay.
Almost anybody you do business with, you're going to originate your loan with one company and they're gonna sell it on the open market and you're gonna pay your mortgage monthly to you don't know who. My company doesn't do that. If you close with SWBC, you're gonna make your monthly payment. But that's a separate issue. We're still just talking about refinancing to a lower rate. I really think if we're wanting transparency, it is better to just list those fees and look at the fees of lender A and look at the fees of lender B.
So don't look at the interest rates. I mean, obviously you want to look at your interest rate, but you're saying then just look at the straight fees, compare the fees.
That is much more useful to a consumer than trying to make it into an APR. Trying to express it as a portion of the interest rate. Because like you said, it's not. It's fees you're paying at closing. So just look at the fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then ask questions about those fees.
Absolutely.
What is this? What is this? Because I know there's that section where it says, these are ones you can shop for, and these are ones you cannot. And so the ones that you cannot, those are set by the federal government? Those are just standardized fees, is that correct?
They're not necessarily standardized fees, but you don't necessarily have choice of provider. It does get really confusing.
That is confusing.
It gets confusing. The government wants consumers to have as much choice as possible, but if you have choice throughout the entire transaction and you switch after a certain point in the game, you're not going to make your closing date.
Right.
So there's a point at which we have to have decided, right? And we're done shopping. And also, frankly, consumers generally don't know the difference between title company A, B, and C.
Right.
And it takes the experts in the field to make a better decision about that, right? So yes, you're going to be able to get a loan estimate, okay, which is the standard form that you're going to get from 2 different companies, and it could have the same interest rate. They could even have the same exact dollar amount of fees, but they're broken out different ways on that loan estimate.
Wow. Okay.
You just need to know that you are working with a lender who is going to sit down with you and go over that line by line, so that you understand it to the best of your ability. You are not going to be an expert. You don't have to do this that many times. So it's not a document that you look at all the time and get comfortable with. You just need to trust who you're working with and that they are explaining it to you in a way that you can understand to the best of your ability.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Got it. So, okay, I'm obviously not a lender and I don't know all the questions to ask, but I know one question that I tell my clients to ask their lender is, what about buying down points? And I'm always a little alarmed when someone's already working with the lender and they're like, what? And I think
Right.
you should have been told about this option. Let's talk about that question that they should ask. What about the option of buying down points, and what are the different ways that can be done?
Okay, and points, we're talking about discount points. That's the full name, discount
So is
points.
a point 1%? Is that what we mean, a point?
That's a rule of thumb that you can use. It is
Okay.
going to be individual by loan, and that's something that your loan officer needs to have a discussion with you about your specific loan. But backing up, that is a conversation that everybody's having right now, all right? That's just the reality in our world. And discount points means that out on the open market, your loan, because it's a market almost like the stock market, and there are your loan with your credit score, your debt to income ratio, your type of loan that you're getting, the length of the term, is it a 15-year or a 30-year? All of that is going to put it in a category, and it's going to generate a rate. You're going to have an interest rate for that loan based on all those factors.
So that tells me that rates do vary based on the person's financial situation.
Yes.
It is not a one size fits all.
It is absolutely not a one size fits all.
What is the general variance? What is the range that you would typically see?
Let's say you've got exactly the same loan and you've got exactly the same debt to income ratio, but you've got a person with a 780 credit score, which is very high, all right? And then you've got a person with a 640 credit score. You could have almost a point difference.
Wow.
There's in some cases you're going to have a point or more, just depending. It's a big difference,
That's
is what I'm saying.
significant.
Credit matters, and it's reflected in the interest rate, and that's a whole conversation we can have about that too.
And just a little side note about that, we mentioned this before, but just to remind people, this is why we talk about don't go buy furniture for the new house or appliances, get a new car,
Yes.
or decide to accept a $20,000 gift. Where'd that come from? You don't do any of that while you're working with the
Yes.
lender and looking for a house.
Yes.
So anyway, go ahead.
Back to points, and points are, so let's say your natural interest rate right now, you're getting a conventional loan, and your natural interest rate out on the market without any points is 7%, okay?
So when you say natural interest rate, you mean like I Google, what's interest rate today? 7%.
I mean, I've taken your loan application,
Okay.
I've got all those factors figured out.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Personalized rate.
Yes,
Okay.
your personalized rate without paying points is, let's say, 7%. All right, that seems kind of high to you. You don't like that. And there's a higher monthly payment associated with that. Before I lock your interest rate for your loan, which is not something that you do right off the bat, we have a conversation, all right, about do you want to pay points? Which is buying discount points, and it lowers your interest rate permanently. All right, this is different from another kind of buy down that we can talk about. But that is the buyer buying some points, and that means paying extra money up front at closing. Okay?
That's the buyer paying that money.
Yes, that's the buyer paying the money up front at closing, permanently reducing the interest rate. And at that point, I usually give my buyers 3 different options. All right, here are our different options. Here is what it costs at closing for that rate. And here's how much it's going to lower your payment every month from your interest rate without points. The first conversation that we need to have is, how long do you expect to stay in the house? You give me your best estimate. If that is your forever home and you are not moving, we're going to have a different conversation than if you think you're going to be in town for 3 years and then get transferred by your job. Right? Because depending on what the payoff amount is, so we know that, and I'm just making up numbers, we know that it costs $3,000 to buy the points. That's an extra $3,000 at closing, and it's going to save you $150 a month. All right. So we know that there's a natural payoff number. We know per month, if you save $150, but it costs $3,000.
How many months is that? Is that what I'm trying to figure out? I was like, how many months it would take to
it's going to
recoup
cost
your
you,
money?
Yeah, it's going to cost you that much, and that's how many months that do we know that you're going to stay in the home that many months? Because if you're not going to stay in the home that many months, you're losing money.
Yeah.
It's cheaper for you to pay that extra amount every month than to pay the upfront. It feels really good to just pay it once and get it done with and have that lower interest rate the entire time, okay? But it doesn't make sense, because let's say frequently it's like a 36-month payoff or something. You're not actually saving money till the 37th month.
Right. So you do. You have to calculate that. It's just a calculation.
It's a calculation. And
Right.
and I've already done that by the time we talk. So I know what the different payoff amount is, or how long you have to live in the house for each rate. And it's also going to vary by how much the buy down is, right? So it is truly individualized.
So I'm thinking there have got to be people that are wondering, well, if I can bring an extra $100,000 to the table, can I get my rate down to 2%? Like what is the range that we're talking? If we assume 7% 3% is the day's rate. What is the range that people can buy down?
You've got limits on how much you can buy it down. And one of the limits is common sense, right? It's not going to make that much sense to buy that down, but you've got parameters, and we can't vary more than a certain amount of points and still be in compliance for a loan.
Okay. So are there other options as far as I'm a little confused, but I've heard that like you can pay more for the house and then the seller contribute some money to buy down the rate, and does that...
So that's a different buy down.
Yeah, so can we talk about that a little bit?
That's a temporary buy down, and that's a seller paid buy down. Okay. And in this market, we're definitely seeing those, right? That's something that your realtor is going to negotiate for you if you're the buyer. That's a totally different buy down, and it's the seller paying for it instead of the buyer. And it's not a permanent buy down of the rate. It lasts for, we've got what we call 3-2-1, 2-1, or even just 1 year.
Why can't it be permanent?
Compliance.
So it's the same amount of money, it's just coming from a different person.
Yes.
Wow.
Part of the reason that the temporary buy downs are popular right now is, number one, the buyer is not using their own money, so they're always going to go for that. And we are all expecting interest rates to come down within, let's say, the next 2-3 years. Right? No one is expecting rates to stay like this indefinitely. So the temporary buy down can really make sense, because what you're doing is the seller is just buying you time as the buyer, buying you time that, because you, the buyer, are going to sit there and keep watching rates. You've got this temporary buy down, you're paying a lower monthly payment than you would without it, and you're watching for your time to refinance.
So then the calculation then is based on the seller, how much extra money the seller is putting in up front versus the monthly savings for that temporary amount of time from the money. I said seller, I meant buyer.
Yeah.
The buyer's putting that initial extra money up front into the home, and the seller giving some money to buy down the rate temporarily. So then the buyer's comparing how much money I'm putting in initially up front compared to how much I'm saving each month on a lower rate for this set amount of time.
Yes, if you are increasing your purchase price to accommodate that seller buy down, okay, then yes, that is something and sometimes you're not increasing the purchase price to accommodate the seller buy down. Depends on that seller and the circumstances. Yeah. Sometimes you're just getting it as part of your concessions, and then the lender basically sets up a separate little account for that amount of money, and we make part of that payment every month. And then, so one question that we get is, okay, I've got this great seller buy down for 3 years. Seller has paid my interest rate down for 3 years. What if interest rates drop during that time and I really want to refinance before my buy down is up? I don't want to waste my money.
Right.
You're not going to waste your money. If interest rates drop, you get a great deal that you're comfortable with, you want to refinance before your buy down is up, whatever is left in your little escrow account for your buy down, we just credit that towards principal.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, you don't ever lose anything if you don't keep that buy down going the entire time.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. That was very helpful. One more topic to cover today, underwriting. That is like this nebulous, scary blob.
It is this big, scary thing.
What is that?
Okay, mortgage is a very heavily regulated industry. All right, that back in 2008, those of us old enough remember that it wasn't so heavily regulated back then. So now it is, and underwriting is a big part of that. We get audited all the time by the state, by the feds, everything. The underwriter's position in the mortgage company is to make sure that we are following loan guidelines to the letter of the law.
So are they a third party, or are they tied to the lender?
That's a great question. That's a question to ask your lender too.
Oh, okay.
For me, I have the same underwriter all the time. Okay, I work at a retail loan company. My team never changes. Right? My people have been there years and years. I work with the same people every time. If you go to work for if you choose to do business with a mortgage broker, somebody like that, their teams are going to be different. They're going to have different people handling their files depending on who they're selling the loan to afterwards. I'm not selling the loan, remember? So I'm always working with the same people. I know who's touching your documents.
So to me, that says that you have a relationship with them. You know what their expectations are, so you can help head off issues before they even come up, because you'll know to address it with your client before you submit to underwriting.
Yes.
Okay.
We work together.
Yeah.
We're a team. Even though they may be in San Antonio or somewhere else, we are always working working with the same people. So the underwriter, the loan originator works with our client. We get all the information. The processor helps us gather the information and make sure we've got everything in the file that the loan says we have to have. The underwriter takes all of that information against the checklist of what we have to have and makes sure that the documentation is there, it's complete, and it's acceptable according to the guidelines. Not according to the underwriter because they're mean, all right? It's not that underwriters are mean, it's that they have to do that job to make sure that your loan is valid.
So when you just talk about those different steps, is that the buyer talking to a different person, or is through all of those different steps the buyer is actually just communicating with you, the
That's
lender?
also going to vary by loan officer, and by loan company that you choose. You're rarely, as a consumer, you're not going to talk to the underwriter.
Right.
Okay? You're mainly talking to me. You're also talking to my loan partner or loan processor sometimes when it comes to actually getting the right papers. If we're missing a paper or a page of something, you may not talk to me for that specific request. You're never going to talk to an underwriter though. That's really, they're kind of separated from the consumer because their job is to make sure that everything is in order and compliant with what the guidelines for the loan are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Melinda, last but not least, we want to know about you and your company, and just tell us about yourself.
Well, I am Melinda Hollerman. I'm A&M class of 97. And I'm now an Aggie mom, class of 2027.
Wow.
And I have been in the community for 31 years this year, and I work for SWBC Mortgage. And SWBC is privately owned, Texas owned, San Antonio based, so you're not going to see some of the tumultuousness that you see in publicly traded companies. There's a variety of reasons I chose SWBC as the firm I wanted to work with. Number one, they're very veteran focused. We do a lot of veteran products. We do Texas Veterans Land Board loans, the full range of VA products, including VA renovation, which is a great option for veterans that may want to buy a fixer-upper. You can't do that with a normal VA loan, and you can with a reno loan. One big thing for me joining this company is for all of our standard loan products, so conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, kind of the big four, most of the loans that you do, we keep those notes in-house. We do not sell our servicing, which is very rare in this industry. When you close with me and you are closing with one of those loan types, you're going to stay with me and keep writing your monthly check or your monthly auto draft to SWBC. My loan right now has been sold 3 different times that I have with another company, and it's always a little disturbing when you open that letter and you got a new mortgage company. You didn't ask for a new mortgage company, so that was a big deal to me.
Or for taxes, and it switches in the middle of the year, and you're like, oh, I've got to get that 1099 from 2 different companies.
Yes.
You're looking for the old password, and it's just kind of a pain.
So that was a biggie for me, but we've got some really innovative down payment assistance now that is specific to our company that we work with Freddie Mac, up to $10,000 in additional grants for home buyers that we can stack on top of other down payment assistance. So really some exciting stuff there. And just, you'll see a lot of movement and transition in the mortgage industry and people hopping. People stay at this company for years. Everybody I work with has been there 15 plus years, and that's pretty rare in the mortgage industry. It's a great place to work, and I love keeping that connection going with my customers. I mean, we've closed deals together now. We're a team. We really are a team. The realtor, the lender, and the client, the home buyer, all working toward the same goal, all local, all easy to connect with and communicate. It's kind of perfect.
And I will say this, she showed up to this closing and then sat there after the closer left the room and walked my client through the closing documents again, just to make sure he understood everything. I've never seen that in my life.
I do.
So thank you.
I go to my closings and we have our little talk afterwards. And you know what? We have that talk again because after a closing, your head is so full. You just signed so much and oh my gosh, that was so serious. And we all tell you things and you may not remember about the homestead exemption and changing your driver's license and all of those things. And with a local lender, we're going to follow up. And we're also going to be here to answer questions. If you get random mail you don't understand after your closing, you take a picture of that and text that to me and I'll tell you exactly if that's junk or if that's real.
Which my client did because he called me about it too.
Yep.
Thank you, Melinda. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment if you liked today's video or if you have any suggestions for us and if you have questions.
Can I just say, wow?
Yeah. Seriously.
That was a ton of information, and I think we covered about that much of what we could cover.
Yeah. I'm very excited because as a person who's moved several times, I have learned so much about the lending process. And this is information, there's just this huge information asymmetry for people when they are buying a house. And that needs to be leveled out. People need to know what they're doing and what the process is and what questions to ask.
Yeah.
So I am thrilled that we did that interview. She's great.
So when it comes to talking about working with a realtor, you're not only working with a realtor, you're working with a lender, you're working with inspectors and things like that. And that's how we can help you through this entire process. And that's why we say, hey, set up that Zoom call so we can get to know you, you can get to know us, they can get to know the lender, and it makes the buying process go so much easier.
And you feel like you have more control and knowledge through the process rather than just kind of fear-based, oh, take the next step, okay, do the next thing, do the next thing. No, so you know what's going on.
Yeah. So just remember, we've helped people just like you find the right place at the right time.
Right here.
Right here.